Evan Hale worked alone on the mining station near the red dwarf star, and the long hours made the place feel heavy and silent as he repaired the power core and wiped sweat from his brow. He waited for the machine to finish its cycle and listened to the low hum of the walls. The lights above flickered, and he told himself it was normal until the alarm lights flashed red across the bay and the floor shook under his boots. The docking bay door opened by itself, even though he never gave permission, and he froze, staring into the dark air drifting in the metal corridor, and the cold wind carried a strange smell like burning stone. He stepped back because he thought maybe a pirate boarded the station or a killer came to take supplies, and he grabbed the closest tool to defend himself, though he knew a wrench would not save him. Then a tall armored figure stepped inside, and the sound of the armor echoed like thunder across the empty bay. The figure walked like someone who knew exactly where they were going and did not fear anything in the universe, and Evan felt the air grow tight as the armored figure stopped in front of him, and the helmet opened with a hiss, revealing a woman with silver glowing eyes and long dark hair braided with metal strands. Her face had scars that looked like old battles from worlds he never knew, and she stared at him without blinking until he whispered, "Who are you and why are you here?" And she leaned close and spoke in a voice full of warning and weight that made him shiver. "Be careful, human. I am not just any woman. I am the queen who chose you." Evan did not understand because he had never seen her before in his life, and he wondered if she was confused or if someone played a cruel trick on him. But she said his name without asking, and she spoke like she had known him for years, calling him the Repairer of Stars, a title he never heard, and she sounded relieved that he was alive, as if she had crossed the galaxy only to find him. He tried to step back, but her armored hand moved faster than he could see, and she stopped him without touching him, as if her armor reacted to her thoughts, glowing like molten light, and he realized she could crush him if she wished for reasons he did not know. She said her name was Saren Valcora, queen of a distant empire of many worlds, and she said she traveled through 3 galaxies to reach him, and that he was the one she searched for. Evan told her she had the wrong person, and that he did nothing special in his life, but she shook her head and said he once saved her life long ago during a battle he did not remember. She said he touched her armor with his bare hands, and that moment changed everything for her. But he had no memory of meeting an alien queen in his entire life, and before he could ask more, the station lights flickered again. Then the ground shook as if something massive landed on the outer hull. A loud alarm screamed through the halls, and Sarenth turned toward the sound. With sharp focus, she told him enemy hunters followed her, and they would destroy the entire mining station to take her or kill her, and if they detected her presence, no one would survive. She looked at Evan and told him he had a choice: help her escape or hide and watch the station fall. He did not want to help a dangerous stranger, but he also did not want the crew or workers on the far side of the station to die, so he nodded weakly, and she moved him behind her as explosions rocked the station and hot sparks fell from the ceiling. The enemy hunters broke through the docking bay wall and fired beams of bright energy, and Sarenth shielded Evan with her armored body, taking hits that would have turned him to ash. She grabbed his arm and pulled him through the corridors with surprising gentleness, telling him she was wounded and had limited power left. She explained that her council betrayed her, and she escaped a coup that tried to take her throne, and now the traitors hunted her across the stars. She said the only person she trusted was Evan, though he still did not understand why they ran through smoke and broken wires, and he could feel the heat from fires spreading behind them, and as they reached a narrow bridge across the station, she asked him a strange question: "Do you really not remember the day you touched my armor?" Evan stared at her, confused and frightened, and said, "No, I have never touched armor like yours." But she looked at him with sad eyes, as if his answer hurt her. She said his touch awakened something inside the armor. Something that bonded to him, something that made him important to her world, and to her heart, though she did not explain more. The bridge cracked from another explosion, and they jumped to the other side, landing hard on metal plates, and Sarenth limped slightly, showing her injury. But she kept moving and pulling him forward, and Evan started to feel a strange mix of fear and responsibility, because she risked her life for him, even though he did not know. He asked her why she believed he could help her save her empire, and she said because every vision, every prophecy, and every ancient truth pointed to him, and that if he died her people would fall into endless war. She said he held something inside him that he did not yet understand, something that could either save or destroy more worlds than he could imagine. They reached the emergency shuttle bay as the station structure began to break apart from the enemy assault and the roar of collapsing metal shook the floors. Sarenth pushed Evan into a small escape ship and jumped in after him just as the outer wall burst open, revealing the massive enemy warship aiming directly at them. The ship fired a blinding beam, and the Queen slammed her hand on the controls, and the shuttle shot away from the station at terrifying speed. The shockwave hit them, and the shuttle spun out of control as the mining station behind them exploded into bright fire. Evan and Sarenth were thrown against their seats, and alarm screamed inside the shuttle, and Evan felt the world pulling apart around him. The Queen reached out and grabbed his hand, holding it tight, as if she feared losing him in the chaos. She whispered, "If we die here, everything I crossed the stars for ends with you." Evan, the shuttle broke in half as debris smashed into them, and they were pulled into a swirling wormhole that opened in front of them, sucking light and metal and fire into its twisting mouth. Time stretched, sound melted, and Evan could only see the Queen holding him in her arms as the wormhole swallowed them whole, and everything turned into blinding white silence as their bodies drifted between stars and shadows, leaving the burning station behind forever. Evan woke with a heavy breath, and the world around him felt soft and strange, as if he floated inside a dream made of silver light. He opened his eyes slowly and found himself lying on a smooth, glowing floor inside a vast hall shaped like the inside of a star. The ceiling shimmered with living metal that shifted like waves, and giant pillars rose into the sky, each carved with symbols from a language he did not know. Guards in shining armor stood around him, and they were not pointing weapons, but instead lowering their heads to him, as if he were someone important, someone he had never been in his entire life. He tried to sit up and his body ached, but he saw the Queen lying beside him, still breathing, still alive, and he felt a strange wave of relief, even though he barely knew her. The guards knelt and said, "Welcome, chosen consort," and Evan froze because he had no idea what that meant. The guards stepped back as the Queen slowly opened her eyes like someone waking from centuries of sleep, and when she saw Evan, she smiled with a tired, sad warmth that made him feel as if she had been holding on to life only to reach him. She whispered, "They brought us to my palace ship," and Evan looked around in shock, realizing he had been pulled across the stars again and ended up in the heart of an alien empire. He did not understand. The Queen stood with difficulty, but her presence still filled the hall with power and respect. She told the guards to leave them alone, and they obeyed immediately. Once they were alone, she sat beside him and looked at his hands as if they held the answer to every question in the universe. Evan asked her everything he had kept inside. "Why did you call me chosen? Why did you cross galaxies for me? Why do they bow to me? I am nobody." The Queen took a long breath and told him the truth. She said years ago, before he even knew aliens existed, he found a crashed escape pod near an abandoned satellite he had been repairing. The metal shell was cracked and leaking strange light, and he thought the pod was empty. He opened it and saw broken armor, but he did not see the Queen inside because she had been fading and too weak to move. She said he touched the armor to reconnect a loose energy line inside the pod, and in her culture, the armor of a queen is alive and bound by ancient laws, and if a queen is near death and someone touches her armor, the armor bonds to the touch forever. She said that bond marked Evan as the one fate chose for her, the one destined to stand at her side. The one who could awaken the true power hidden inside her throne, and her people. Evan listened in disbelief because he remembered fixing a damaged pod once, but he had thought it was just a piece of old tech drifting in space. He never knew a life rested inside. She told him he saved her with simple kindness, with a human act of repair, and that moment changed not only her life, but the future of her entire empire. She said the armor carried his genetic signature, and that signature guided her visions, guided her journeys, guided her decisions, and led her to cross 3 galaxies to find him. When her council betrayed her, they feared the prophecy that said a human consort would break their old corrupt traditions and bring a new age to the empire, and so they hunted her to stop him from being found. Evan felt overwhelmed, but he also felt something deeper, a quiet truth that he did not want to abandon her after everything she suffered because of him. She stood and reached for him, offering her hand, and he took it even though he did not know what the future held. She led him through long shimmering halls filled with murals showing ancient battles and kings and queens of old, and she explained that her empire stretched across hundreds of worlds, but it was now divided, broken, and bleeding because of the traitors who feared losing power. She said the only way to reclaim her throne was to bond the throne armor to its chosen pair, and that person was him. Evan said he was only an engineer, not a fighter, not a hero, but she told him the armor responded to the heart, not strength, and that his heart was what saved her once before. She led him into a chamber lit by floating crystals, each humming with soft energy, and placed a silver gauntlet on his arm. At first, nothing happened. Then the metal melted across his skin like warm water, shaping itself into a living second layer, and the room filled with bright white light. The queen stepped back and stared at him with awe because the armor reacted more strongly to him than she expected. Ancient symbols lit up around the chamber, as if the entire palace recognized him as the one chosen. Evan felt afraid, but also connected to something greater, and he looked at the queen, who looked back at him with pride and something gentle in her eyes. Before he could speak, the room shook violently, and the lights turned red. The guards rushed inside, shouting that the traitor General Vor had found their location and launched an attack. The queen pulled her spear from a wall mount and activated her own armor, which wrapped around her body like liquid fire. She told Evan to stay behind her, but the gauntlet on his arm pulled him forward, as if guiding him into battle. They ran through the halls as explosions echoed across the ship and enemy forces stormed in firing beams of burning light. The queen fought like a storm, cutting through the attackers with swift, precise strikes, but more enemies poured in, and Evan felt the armor moving his arm, raising a shield of pure energy that blocked a blast that would have killed them both. He did not understand how he did it, but the armor did, and the queen glanced at him with shock and respect. Together they pushed through waves of enemies, but the traitors had brought heavy machines, towering walkers with glowing cores that tore through the palace walls. Evan pointed his gauntlet at one of them, and a beam of white energy erupted, without warning, ripping the machine apart. The queen said no warrior in her empire had ever unlocked that ability. Not even she could do it. The traitors feared him for a reason. They reached the throne chamber, a vast room with a rising platform shaped like a star, and General Vor stood at the top, wearing dark armor corrupted by forbidden tech. He shouted that the age of queens was over, and that no human would ever rule beside their kind. He attacked with a roar, but the queen met him head-on, and their clash shook the entire room. Evan joined the fight, and the armor guided his movements, making him faster, stronger, more aware than he had ever been. They fought as one, the queen with her blazing spear, and Evan with the living gauntlet, and their combined power overwhelmed the traitor. At last Vor fell, and the remaining enemies fled into space, leaving the palace ship in silence. The queen walked to the throne and told Evan to stand beside her. She said no empire could survive without trust, without unity, and that he symbolized everything her people needed: hope, change, compassion. She placed her hand on his chest, and told him she did not choose him only because of fate, but because when she was dying alone in that escape pod, his gentle human hands saved her without knowing who she was or what she meant. That simple kindness meant more than any prophecy, and Evan felt a warmth fill his chest, something like belonging, something he had never felt before the palace.